deeper commitment to awakening is the realization that my purpose in life, my primary purpose, is awakening. My primary purpose is to live consciously, to be a bringer of consciousness into this world. Well, you may have heard me say a few times that the most important things that a child should learn at school are actually not taught, because the most important things one should learn at school and at college are how to be aware of emotions, how to be aware of your thinking, how to be aware, how to not get totally identified with emotions that arise, how not to get totally identified with the stream of thinking. But you learn many other things that are not really important. Nevertheless, somehow you found your way to spiritual teaching, and perhaps or probably through the sufferings of life, you were eventually led to a spiritual teaching and began to realize the possibility within yourself of living from a different state of consciousness, a state that we call the awakened state, that is not identified with the stream of thinking and is no longer egoically possessed. Ultimately, you as the person that you perceive yourself to be does not get awakened. Awakening can happen when the person, the density of the egoic self, the historical person, loses its density, and it does that either through spiritual practice or through suffering, or in most cases a combination of suffering and spiritual practice. If you only live through your historical eye, the surface eye, suffering and frustration and negativity are very common. They're an inescapable part of living in that way, and so after a while, I don't know, it depends how long, you begin to realize that there's no fulfillment to be found there. And what then happens is that the egoic self diminishes in its intensity, it loses its heaviness. The term I sometimes use is the egoic self, the surface self, becomes transparent to the light of consciousness, which is a deep eye. So it no longer totally blocks the deep eye, and it does that because it's been knocked about by suffering, and prolonged suffering has the effect of diminishing the ego, not in every case, but in many cases. So suffering brings about the possibility of deepening, and then it is ultimately more true to say that consciousness awakens in you rather than that you awaken. Consciousness awakens in and through you, so it almost is as if the person were the seed for the awakening of consciousness. And for a seed to sprout, the shell around the seed breaks open, and then the seed sprouts and the plant grows out of the seed, and one could say that the seed dies in order to enable the plant to be. And in a way, that is ultimately the purpose of the egoic self. The egoic self is the seed for the arising of the deep I, which is the awakening of consciousness. And it breaks and it cracks open through suffering, and then in addition there's a spiritual teaching that accelerates the process. So you as a person do not really achieve awakening, spiritual awakening of consciousness. It's not something that you can say, I have achieved the awakening of consciousness. No, the consciousness has awakened because the surface self, or the egoic self, cracked open through suffering, plus the help of a spiritual teaching to accelerate it, and made way for something else to arise. So that's really the answer to the question, who or what is it that awakens when there is spiritual awakening? And we cannot really say that the person awakens, because that which awakens far transcends the person. But if the person hadn't been there, that awakening would not be happening there. So the person was a prerequisite, including the ego that seemed to obstruct the awakening. Even that was a prerequisite for the awakening. All the things that seemed to obstruct the awakening, all the suffering, all the bad things that seemed to be obstacles to awakening, actually were there to ultimately facilitate the awakening. And that's the paradox. The ego itself, which seems to be a huge blockage to the awakened consciousness, is a necessary prerequisite for the flowering of consciousness. There's quite a paradox there, but that's how it works. So it all has its place, and it's all fine, and it's all how it's meant to be.